more stressed when figure out how to do this right. So. Good morning, everyone. Morning. See you all. Thank you for yes. Secretary. Oh, thank you. Good morning. We really enjoy this, and life's so busy, and like we're doing awards, and we love doing the award part. And it's like here we are again because there's so many great things happening in the state of Oregon. So, welcome to the State Land Board Award Ceremony. This is our annual celebration of people and projects who help Oregon's wetlands, waters, and lands thrive. We have some amazing Oregonians in the room today. Since 2004, these awards have highlighted how collaboration and innovation benefits Oregon's natural resources and inspires stewardship. Today's honorees are now part of that remarkable legacy. The awards themselves are extraordinary works of art. I hope you got a chance to take a look at them. The reclaimed wood plaques for the awards were made by volunteers in my old haunt, St. John's in North Portland. So beautiful wood. Thank you very much. Shout out to St. John's. And the artwork is woven by hand using traditional indigenous basket weaving techniques and natural materials gathered from across Oregon's landscapes. And each of the awards on the back tells you a little bit more about the weaving. Each piece reflects the deep ecological knowledge and cultural relationships that indigenous communities have maintained with this land since time immemorial. The materials are woven together just as our efforts to care for Oregon's lands and waters must be, in partnership, with respect, and with intention. We are honored to feature the work of Stephanie Craig. Yes, Stephanie. Pati Tumtum Nasiyakwi, a master weaver, anthropologist, and cultural educator. Through her art, she carries forward ancestral teachings and reminds us that stewardship is not a solitary act. It's something we do together across generations and across communities. So thank you for joining us today and for your beautiful contributions, Stephanie. These are, you can watch out. Everyone's going to see these and want you to do more. So really appreciate that. And this is a team effort here at the Land Board. So the Secretary of State and the State Treasurer will be doing the awards, and then I'll come back. And I would like to hand over the rostrum to Secretary Reed, who will present our first award.
Thank you, Governor, and thanks everyone for being here. It is indeed a really appropriate time for celebration amidst all the other things that are happening in the world. It's nice to have a chance to be with all of you. My pleasure today to present the first award to the STREAM project. And I had a nice conversation with some of the people involved, so I feel more connected with it than when I got here. This award goes to a project that restored more than 8.5 miles of streams and smaller tributaries, and in doing so, reconnected more than 100 acres of wetland habitat in Oregon's beautiful Blue Mountains. Located in a high montane ecosystem, this area serves as source water for the downstream communities of Perry, LeGrand, Imbler, Elgin, Somerville, and the Grand Ronde Valley. And it supports critical habitat for Columbia River bull trout and many other native species. It's already showing early signs of success. Everybody can feel good about that. Beavers have returned to the stream system, signaling a positive shift for all the native flora and fauna. And it was a true collaboration, this project. I got a little sense of that already this morning. Led by Trout Unlimited, the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and a wide range of support from a network of public, private, and nonprofit partners. I think they will show up on the screen at some point. So I hope you will all join me in congratulating the 2025 Land Board Stream Award winner, the Sheep Creek Steward Project. And if you could come forward, make sure you get the award, please. Photo. Somebody else has to hold this. I'll be doing that. Okay.
Yes.
I think there's just multiple comments. Okay, here we go. logistics once again. Good morning, everybody. I'm State Treasurer Elizabeth Steiner, and thank you, Treasurer Reed. And it's a wonderful way to kick off this morning's awards. Congratulations again to the I can't talk this morning, clearly. Sheep Creek Stewardship Project. The Wetland Award, I have to freely admit, I was delighted that I got to do this one because I'm a huge wetlands fan. And this award honors projects that restore and protect Oregon's vital wetland ecosystems. And this year's award goes to a mitigation project that spans over 80 acres in Troutdale, the West Sundial Wetlands. And I have to say, because I love wetlands, as soon as I saw this in my materials a couple of weeks ago, I texted my friend who I always go birding with in wetlands and said, guess where we're going next? So watch out, folks, I'm coming your way. Led by the Port of Portland in partnership with Mosaic Ecology, this project transformed a landscape once dominated by non-native pasture grasses into a thriving wetland ecosystem. It now supports a diverse mosaic of habitats. I get that, Mosaic Ecology, love that, including forested, emergent, and shrub wetlands, along with upland buffer zones. The wetlands not only provide flood storage for the surrounding community, but also enhance habitat connectivity for species like the northern red-legged frog, I had to look that one up, and wetland birds, my favorites. And thanks to collaboration with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, the project also protects a nearby archaeological site and shares its cultural significance through interpretive signage along the Chak Trail. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Please join me in congratulating the 2025 Land Board Stream Award winner, West Sundial Wetlands, for this outstanding achievement in ecological restoration and cultural stewardship.
He's the best.
Yes.
Take a point of privilege here. It is really great to hang out with real people doing really great things. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Okay, there's a few other things going on. So thank you, Madam Treasurer, and congratulations again to the West Sundial Wetlands Group. Fantastic work. So we are now moving on. I have a couple more awards here. Next award is our Catalyst Award, which I love. It's, who doesn't want to grow up and say, I'm a catalyst? And so this award is about honoring, we have two awards, the Catalyst Award and the Partnership Award. And it's about recognizing those people and groups who have really advanced what the department's mission is, which is collaboration and partnership. So I'm going to start with the Catalyst Award. So today, we're going to honor a leader whose work exemplifies what it means to be a catalyst. Someone who brings people together, sparks action, and drives meaningful change for Oregon's lands and waters. As Umatilla County's Umatilla County's Soil and Water Conservation District Manager, Kyle Wagner leads with vision, trust, and deep local knowledge. His work connects landowners, irrigators, and agencies like the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Oregon Department of State Lands in very powerful ways. From creating the Landowners River Resiliency Guidebook to securing major restoration funding and shaping the McKay Creek Watershed Plan, Kyle's leadership is driving results. And I will say, not to embarrass you, but I feel a little bit of an underachiever when I meet someone as young as Kyle. So you're doing great work, my friend. Please join me in congratulating the 2025 Land Board Catalyst Award winner, Kyle Wagner. And now we're going to talk about the Partnership Award. It's our final award for the day, and it honors collaboration that drives real, measurable change. And the John Day Basin Partnership is a model of that success. This coalition of 30 tribal, local, state, and federal partners is restoring the largest Salmonid Basin in Oregon, which I just learned, and the longest free flowing river in the state. In just 6 years, they've removed 58 fish barriers, restored over 50 miles of stream, reconnected floodplains, and installed more than 250,000 native plants. Their work is improving habitat for steelhead, chinook, bull trout, and lamprey, and advancing science through long-term watershed monitoring. It's a really huge job. And to all those partners, I want to thank you for your shared vision, your dedication, and your extraordinary impact on Oregon's rivers and communities. And we have all the partnership members of the partnership on the screen here. You can see, scroll through that. I think there's probably at least another. Is there one more slide? Okay, just that one. Well, that's a lot of people all in and of themselves. So we do great things in Oregon because we know how to work together. And this award is just one other, way to elevate that. And with that, I'd like to congratulate the 2025 Land Board Partnership Award winners, the John Day Basin Partnership. Thank you very much. So again, congratulations to all our Land Board Award recipients, and thank you for everyone who's joined us today and people who are watching streaming. It's really important for us to celebrate exceptional projects and successes in our state. And I know on behalf of my fellow Land Board members, we're just so proud to be with you today as Oregonians. So thank you very much.
All right, everyone. If our awardees could please exit this way, we'll be going outside to take group photos with the land board while we prepare the room for the land board meeting. Thank you, everyone. Right here.
Hold on one second. Good morning. Thank you everyone for returning. I'm going to call the State Land Board meeting to order for October 14th, 2025. We do have our newest director here, Director Caitlin Lovell. It's her first meeting. I'm not promising no one will ask you weird questions to give you a good introduction. But I again want to thank all the award winners of the 21st Annual State Land Board Awards who were here to start off our morning and how they represent really amazing things that Oregonians are doing. So, and some of them are still here joining us for the meeting. We have a series of action items today. We'll start off with the consent item, which is the minutes, and then action items. We do not have any public testimony today for the one action item. And with that, let's go to item number 1, the consent calendar. And I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the minutes from 10th, 25.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Second by Madam Treasurer. Are there any objection changes to the minutes? Seeing none, motion approved. We will now move on to item number 2, which is about the LA State Research Forest Board appointments. Director Lovell.
Morning, everyone. Thank you. Before I speak to the board recommendations, I wanted to note that originally we had planned to provide a 1-year update on the Elliott Forest Management Plan, which was adopted by this body last October. We have moved that presentation to the December meeting where we will have a number of items with a climate theme. I welcome any questions that you may have today, however. When the State Land Board appointed the Elliott State Research Forest Board in June of 2024, it established a staggered board. 3 members were to serve 1-year term, 3 were to serve a 2-year term, and 3 others were to serve a 3-year term. Today is an important milestone, marking the 1-year mark for those inaugural board terms. Today, I am pleased to recommend existing board members to new 4-year terms. First, Haley Lutz, the Executive Director of the Coos Watershed Council, and Peyton Smith, the Director of Communications and Government Affairs for Southport Lumber. There's also a vacancy created by my appointment to director. Today, I am recommending Dr. Ken Carloni to fill that position for the remainder of the term. That is a 3-year term. This process also prompted Department of State Lands to revisit the Forest Management Plan's commitment to tribal engagement on the Elliott State Forest. Our goal is to provide opportunities for both tribal governments and individual Indigenous experts on the management of the Elliott State Forest. Today, there are 2 Indigenous natural resource management experts currently serving on the Elliott State Research Forest Board who provide valuable contributions to the operating plans, research discussions, and board development. These are contributions that we wish to continue. But importantly, these individuals do not represent tribal governments. DSL has not engaged in government-to-government tribal consultation since the adoption of the Forest Management Plan or the Habitat Conservation Plan. Today, I am inviting and requesting consultation with 5 tribes on tribal engagement on the forest, which necessarily would include conversations on both tribal and non-tribal engagement on the Elliott. During this period, I have asked one board member, Mike Wilson, who has provided excellent service to the Elliott State Forest Board with his expertise in Indigenous natural resource management, to carry over his term and continue to provide his expert service to the Elliott and to the forest, where we develop with the tribes our tribal engagement approach. I hope to bring a recommended appointment to the State Land Board on that remaining 4-year term as we engage in this tribal consultation. So with that, I would ask for you to consider the recommendations of Haley Lutz, Peyton Smith, and Dr. Ken Carloni to the Elliott State Forest Board.
Thank you, Director Lovell. I would entertain a motion for the recommendation.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation and the appointments as the director described.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Madam Treasurer, thank you for the second. Discussion.
Madam Chair, I just appreciate the continued devotion and dedication of this group. Really feel positive about the direction they're taking, and they're going to add a lot to the capability and the momentum. So thanks.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
I would echo what Secretary Reed said, but I would just ask Director Lovell, Mr. Wilson has indeed provided excellent service, and we're very grateful to him. And being left in limbo is a little bit challenging. And while on the one hand, we never want to rush these processes, do you have a sense of the timeline for your consultation process and when you're likely to come back to us with recommendations?
That's a very good question. We have not yet sent out our formal letter for consultation, so we don't have a good sense of the tribal consultation, but certainly the engagement and contributions of the non-Indigenous voices on the Elliott Forest Board is a high priority of mine, so I'd like to resolve that issue quickly.
Thank you, because being left in limbo is challenging, and Mr. Wilson his experience is inordinately valuable, and I will just express my gratitude to him for his willingness to hang in there for a little while you sort this out. I think it's very appropriate what you're doing, and so thank you.
We appreciate everything that he has done, and I'm very grateful for his patience while we do this.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. And I would just say we had the annual Government to Government Tribal Summit last week on the South Coast. And the issue of the Elliott Forest was raised in a very, hey, we want to look, the tribes want to engage on the issue of what will continue to be an evolving partnership on the research forest. So glad to hear the department is instigating and initiating the consultation discussion, and would agree. We've had wonderful people on the board. This is another, step in the development, and look forward to the next report on how the consultation is going with the tribes. So we have a motion on the table. Are there any, I guess it's an information item, no action item. So we have to take a vote. Any objections to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to return briefly to the first item, the consent calendar on the minutes, because
I'm sure I messed up.
you were listening more than we all were. So yes.
Yeah, my original motion, I mentioned the June 10th meeting, and everyone voted for that. I neglected to say the July 9th meeting as well. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to move approval of the minutes of the July 9th meeting as well.
Thank you. First motion and a second. Any objections or concerns about the minutes from July?
No objection. I should have mentioned this earlier. I just want to thank Director Days Durat from Dogami for spending a lot of time with my team and me, because we were new to this whole geologic sequestration, urban sequestration. Okay, I'm getting this. And he gave us a fascinating presentation on that. So I just want to express my thanks to him and his team for that.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Seeing no objections, the July minutes are also adopted. So thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that catch. We'll now move on to our informational items for the meeting. And item number 3 is our annual report on the Common School Fund.
Thank you. I'm very excited to invite our guests from Treasury, Louise Howard and Jamie McCreary, up. They will be presenting the Common School Fund annual report. As many of you know, the Treasury Department acts as our investor for this report, and they have a lot of great news to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Just introduce yourself for the records, and we're lucky to have you here. Thank you.
Let me get it together.
Is the mic?
This too. Perfect. Yeah, thanks. So for the record, I'm Louise Howard. I'm the Director of Capital Markets. And
Jamie McCrary, Service Model Program Manager with Treasury.
okay. And again, thank you for your time this morning. I'm using my glasses and they're brand new, so sorry about that. And again, we represent the investment division, and we thank you for the opportunity to provide this annual update on the Common School Fund's investment portfolio. And we live and die by our slide decks. So this one is short, but we wanted to be efficient with your time and leave room for questions. So we wanted to quickly review some of the foundational history and evolution of the Common School Fund, and then highlight the asset allocation as well as the fund's performance, and then end with the accomplishments that we have had over the past year, as well as our strategic priorities, that we're working on. I would say that should leave us enough time to take questions, but please feel free to stop us and ask at any time. There we go.
All right. All right, so I'm going to highlight the fund objectives and allocation. So to start, so as you all know, the Common School Fund is an endowment fund providing financial support for public education in Oregon with a current net asset value of $2.6 billion. The fund's operationally controlled by the Department of State Lands, and the Oregon Investment Council, OIC, oversees the investment strategy to be implemented and managed by the staff at Treasury. As with any endowment portfolio, the decision-making hierarchy with mission and objective setting is very important. The State Land Board has determined that the Common School Fund should be viewed as a perpetual fund to be managed to benefit both present and future beneficiaries of the Oregon's Department of Education. The investment portfolio should preserve and enhance the real and inflation-adjusted market value of the fund's assets over the long term, net of annual spending and expenses. To achieve this objective, the State Land Board adopted a long-term investment horizon such that the short-term spending needs and market volatility will be monitored and balanced with the long-term real objective. The mission and objective is what informs the distribution or the spending policy. A typical endowment with a similar mandate would comfortably support a 3 to 5% annual spending policy. As I'm sure you all recall, SB 1566 established the school's district's unfunded liability fund. And with that, the spending policy was adjusted from 4% down to 3.5% on a 3-year rolling average asset value of the fund. The combination of these two distributions, along with additional expenses, get us to an inflation and projected target return requirement in the high single digits. That's what's required to maintain the fund's purchasing power on a perpetual basis, realizing the fund's mission. So, buttons are strange. Taking all that into account, this fund has evolved over the years. To be efficient with time, I'm not going to go over all the different points on here. The things I would like to highlight, though, is it is best practice to do an asset allocation every 3 to 5 years. The OIC formally adopted a new asset allocation in 2022. We were set to do an asset allocation study this year. The OIC moved that to next year to fall in line with the pensions asset allocation to do both of those in the same year. So that would be at year 4, which is still right in line with that 3 to 5 year mandate that we have. So hopefully next year around this time, we will have an update for you on the asset allocation and if OIC adopts any sort of changes or anything to the asset allocation and the investment policy. But I will pause here before we move on to the allocation and performance to see if there's any questions on the evolution or objectives. Okay. Nope. There we go. I'll get it by the end of this, I swear. All right, slide 5 shows the fund's asset allocation. You'll notice that there's an interim target and a long-term target here. And the OIC specified an interim target, and this is there to mostly transition the policy benchmark to better align with the pacing similar to the actual portfolio, especially because for the alternative assets, that can take some time to actually get to that full target. So that's the reason that interim target is there. The story has remained the same as last year. We continue to be overweight to the public markets, fixed income and public equity, and underweight to the alternative assets because we're still, building out the allocations there. We're making more progress than the active weight actually portrays, but the alternatives, primarily private equity, has just been really slow to call capital. which you'll see here shortly when Louise goes over performance. That still has remained actually very beneficial for this fund because the public markets have been on such a nice increase over the past couple of years. The other thing I would like to note is that the overall equity exposure is in line with policy. So public plus private, if you add those up, the 47.5 and 12.5 is around 60%. The current active weight of where we're at is about 61.3. So we're a little bit over, and that's due to the other alternative assets being slightly underweight, primarily real estate and diversifying strategies. So our overall risk profile is still right in line with where we want to be. So with that, if there's no questions on the allocation, I'd like to hand it over to Louise to provide an update on performance. You want me?
Sorry. All right, great. And what you have before you is the performance table for the fund as of June 30th of this year. And if we move past the quarter end into the 1 year, we see that it has outperformed its policy benchmark. And over this period, all of the asset classes have produced positive returns, with the majority of them outperforming their respective benchmarks. And in peer comparisons of endowments under $5 billion, the Common School Fund ranks either first or second quartile across all time frames. And if we look further out on an absolute basis, we'll see that the 10-year return has proved consistent with the long-term assumption of a 7.1% nominal return. And that's noteworthy because that's the assumed return that's required to maintain the fund's real purchasing power over time. And when we talk about performance, we do like to think about it in context of just the market backdrop. And I think this market is pretty unescapable with volatility, tariff and policy uncertainty, geopolitical tensions, and the persistence of the AI trade. So those are just some of the headwinds that the market is contending with. And in spite of and or because of the markets, both domestic and outside of the US, have continued to march higher. So, you know, we're pleased, but again, these are headwinds that we're prepared to continue to face moving forward. And then if we dive down into the asset classes, you can see across most of the time periods, the bars are all pointing up. So the asset classes are generating positive returns to the Common School Fund. In the 3-year time period, you see both private equity and real estate, they have dipped down. And for private equity, that's due to the J curve and that capital being called a bit slower. And then in real estate, we saw market write-downs. But if you look out further, you'll see that all of the asset classes are positively contributing. And again, we always try to put on that long-term investor cap when we think about markets and performance, as to not overreact and be quite mindful and maintain our discipline. Thank you. And then, you know, we are more than halfway through what has been an impactful decade for the fund, having made material adjustments starting in 2018 and continuing the work based on the revised investment strategy, which Jamie mentioned. And we are working within the asset classes to refine exposures. And again, we expect to see potentially any change at the margins from this most recent asset allocation study. But again, those would be marginal changes to asset class weights. again, performance despite volatility has been quite strong. But I would say the caution is always volatility or the next news item that's going to come to the press and which can negatively impact markets. And we experienced some of that over the course of the last week. It's been a busy year. We've had nice distributions, and that's a trend that we see coming into the next year. And most importantly, where Jamie started, our NAV is at an all-time high of 2.6 billion. But we did want to highlight over this 15-year period, the NAV is sort of the net result of activities within the fund. And over that period, the fund has distributed 960 million approximately to our schools K through 12 and has added 192 million, again, approximately, to PERS. So that's always great to see, and we thank you for the work getting that. Those would be the end of our comments, and we are here to answer questions if you have.
Thank you for being here. We've got a former and a current treasurer here. So,
No.
Secretary Reed, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's good to see you both. Thanks.
Yes.
For being here. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the rationale or thinking around moving the asset allocation in line with the pension fund and the advantages or disadvantages about having that happen at the same time versus another time, and then more specifically, whether the conversations around the relative underperformance of private equity over the last periods is influencing your thinking and where you might anticipate that allocation going. 10 to 20% is a big approved range.
So I can speak to private equity. And do you want to take the first part of the question?
Thank you, Secretary, for the question. Yes, I would say in regards to the asset allocation, 3 to 5 years is the typical time frame. And in 2022, I would say that was a fairly big change to policy and a big increase to the alternatives. That implementation didn't get started until 2023. So I think also with some of that, it wasn't necessarily pushing it out to fall in line fully with the pension asset allocation, but also, in some ways pushing it out to fall in line of, we use a lot of the same methodology in regards to what the asset class expectations are in a 10-year forward-looking time frame. And a lot of times we use a lot of the same funds that we use for the pension within the common school fund. And so it is kind of a best ideas type of aspect that we're pulling from the pension to put into the common school fund and leverage that aspect. So having those be in line kind of made sense in regards to, in some ways, of just the work that's going to be done. We're using the same information with that. And then also pushing it out from being 3 years out further, because we're still in that stage where we're implementing to the alternatives that have been a little bit slower to call. So there hasn't been a drastic change there.
I'm not as worried about the delay, because what you said
Yeah.
makes sense to me. I was thinking about whether if it's the same info, whether you get a net benefit of having another look at another time, looking at the same questions, in between the pension fund. But I think I understand your point too.
Yeah, but then, and I would add to that too, that every year we do look at the assumed numbers for the 10-year forward looking, but every 3 to 5 years is where we take more of a deeper dive. So every year we are still looking and adjusting those numbers though, and taking a look at how that impacts the allocation.
And then I think to private equity in particular, again, when we think about asset allocation, we are getting return expectations over long time frames. So even though, again, I understand the challenges in this most recent period around privates. One of the things we know going into the asset class is that it is quite illiquid. So to make a radical change in asset allocation, it's difficult to affect that meaningfully. I think for the Common School Fund, we're in a pretty good position because we've been relatively underweight. So still, I think because it's an endowment, I don't anticipate, and from all of the asset allocation work that I like, a 5% change to an asset class weight would be radical. I would think we might see 2.5 would be something more meaningful. But I think where we've been comfortable where we are, and we're still at the collection phase of assumed returns. And as we've had conversations with the consultants, those long-term return expectations haven't changed meaningfully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Madam Treasurer.
I just want to thank Team Treasury. It's great to have you all here. And for a very clear presentation. I do want to emphasize a point that Ms. Howard made at the end, which is, you know, if you're looking at the growth, this is very solid growth of the fund. And it's not what you would expect if the principal were to remain intact, right? You would expect to see much higher amounts, but when you've distributed over $1 billion over 15 years, you lose the ability to grow the fund on those dollars, right? So I had actually pestered Ms. Howard late last week, and so I understand why it's not in here, for a new slide that showed roughly what it would have looked like had we not distributed those funds, because I do think that's important information. And so I just want to emphasize the point that the fund has distributed almost $1 billion to the state school fund over 15 years, and then another $150 million, $200 million to the Oregon Public Employee Retirement Fund, which is benefiting from that. So it's just important to point that out to the audience, because you would expect a fund that started at just under $1 billion in 2010 to be a lot higher, especially when there's, in addition to investment returns, there's significant input from trust property, unclaimed property on an annual basis. And in fact, the reason we don't see that is because we're distributing so much to help public education and to help grow our pension fund and reduce our unfunded actuarial liability. So, not to get too techy. I just want to show my predecessor these trained me well.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. And thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions. So anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the great work. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate the DSL staff who work very closely with Treasury. Our Deputy Director, Jean Straight, she's the Deputy Director of Administration. And sadly, this is her last land board meeting before she retires in November. And our Finance Manager, Joe Flagger. They are really responsible for working closely with Treasury to put DSL on sound financial footing and to maintain that stewardship of the Common School Fund.
Thank you for your work and congrats on the retirement.
Next item.
Next item, let's move on to informational item number 4, the Oregon Ocean Science Trust annual report.
Great. Thank you. OOST, as it is called. I love that word. I'd like to invite up our guest speakers, Laura Anderson, the chair of the OOST board. Is Karina Nelson? Yeah. And, Lisa Debricare, who I believe is online. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Laura Anderson.
And I'm Karina Nielsen.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. We have a short 10-minute presentation to talk about the Oregon Ocean Science Trust here. As Chair and founding board member of the trust, I've been tracking this for our 12-year history. My background is mostly in seafood business. I started on my dad's commercial fishing boat back many years ago, culminated in the founding of Local Ocean Seafoods Restaurant and Fish Market, which I hope you've all enjoyed at some point in Newport, Oregon.
Great, and thank you. As I said, Karina Nielsen, I'm vice chair together with Laura of the trust, and I've been a trustee since 2022. And I bring over 30 years of experience in marine ecology, and I've been a professor working at the interface of science and policy for both Oregon and California primarily, so regionally have a regional depth. But I came to science a little later in life after working in the arts and cooking in the restaurant business. So we share some fun tales around restaurant life. But now I direct the Oregon Sea Grant Program, which is a cooperative program between NOAA and Oregon State University to benefit the entire state. And I'm a professor of practice at OSU. Also, and this will be relevant a little later in our presentation, I remain a trustee for the California Ocean Science Trust, which is a very similar entity. Do you want to introduce Laura?
Lisa? Yeah.
Sorry, Laura, do you want to introduce Lisa?
Michelle. So joined by Lisa DeBruckiere. She is our Director of Strategic Initiatives and Programs for the Trust. She serves as a direct liaison between the Department of State Lands and oversees our day-to-day operations, and is also going to be driving our slideshow. So next slide, please, Lisa. Just a few nuts and bolts. As I mentioned, OOST was created about 12 years ago by the legislature. The purpose is really to build and diversify direct funding for ocean research that informs state decision-making. So it's not to make policy, but inform policy. We're not a state agency, you know that. We're linked through the Department of State Lands as our parent agency. We have an account in the Oregon Treasury, but we also have a direct relationship with Oregon Community Foundation that allows us to take charitable contributions. Another important thing to know is we don't do science. We act as a fiscal platform and a convener, and we leverage these public and private funds, mostly distributing them through competitive grant programs to high priority areas for ocean research. The priorities themselves are really important. We base our priorities from science summits. We've done these twice in our history, so about every 6 years. We did one just a couple of years ago. We bring together, in the last one, over 50 of our world-class researchers, policymakers, agency staff to identify the priorities I'm about ready to share for you. Just so you know, we have a very small and mighty board of directors that includes 5 voting members. We also have Representative David Gomberg and Senator Dick Anderson, who are legislative liaisons and are non-voting members. Next slide. So what are those priorities that the science experts in Oregon have deemed as of our most recent summit? First is, no surprise, climate. Often when we talk about climate, we're talking about fossil fuels and transportation, but you know, the ocean is both a buffer and a potential climate solution. So how do we advance our understanding of that? Energy, energy infrastructure, it has waxed and waned in Oregon, and regardless of where federal policy is, Oregon has to stay ahead of the curve in understanding how these large-scale infrastructure projects like offshore wind, for example, could affect ecosystems and communities. So it's going to be a priority for the OOST. Fisheries, near and dear to my heart. We have some of the best managed world-class fisheries on the planet. How do we sustain those? It requires continued science. It doesn't just happen. Shared data, adaptive management tools, all of this is on our high priority list. And then finally, just the recognition from the Oregon's Territorial Sea Plan that we have these remarkable ecosystems, our kelp forests, our rocky reefs, our sandy habitats that are vital for Dungeness crab and other species. Just supporting the ongoing long-term monitoring capacity for these nearshore ecosystems is critical to our ocean's health. So in addition to all of that, we are vested in building the platforms and the data management and sharing tools needed so that Oregon science community can connect. On to funding. Since 2021, we've received about $2 million in state funding, both through strong bipartisan support and gubernatorial support to advance Oregon's ocean science priorities. We've also received philanthropic support to strengthen mostly our organizational capacity. The state funds have gone directly into research, but in order to build the kind of partnerships that Dr. Nielsen's going to talk to you about, it takes additional capacity building funds to support tribal engagement and really do the regional ocean planning work for the future. So I think together with these investments, we've demonstrated that we're functioning as we were intended to, a flexible, transparent platform to receive, deploy funds very quickly, very efficiently. We get funds from multiple sources and we can put them out to multiple sources now. Quick slide that just shows how some of our funds have catalyzed additional investment. Sometimes our funds have been a catalyst that seeds for a new project that have grown into multi-million-dollar investments. Sometimes it's just Oregon showing up as a co-investor that's aligning with larger federal university and philanthropic priorities. So either way, these dollars are punching above their weight. I think you could say in some cases a 1-to-5 leverage ratio of dollars in terms of how these partner investments are working. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Nielsen.
Great, thanks. We are really proud of the Trust's accomplishment and the chart that we're building for the future of our ocean. As Laura said, we've brought together actually twice scientific and policy experts to help ask the question, what does Oregon need most to understand, sustainably use, and protect our coast and ocean? And from those conversations, we were able to build a framework, a horizon planning process, if you will, to keep the investments for emerging science and priorities flowing to the state and state needs. So we're ready for what's next. With that strong legislative support of $2 million in research and monitoring, we invested in 3 key areas, and I'm going to touch on those in my subsequent slides, but they're tackling the challenges that matter most for Oregon. And the work isn't just about science. It's science that safeguards Oregon's coastal economies, protects our vital ecosystems, and supports communities that depend on the healthy ocean for jobs, food, and resilience in the face of change. The 3 areas that we've made significant investments are first and foremost nearshore ocean and coastal research. It does 2 things at once. It advances fundamental science and our understanding of those ecosystems, and it directly answers Oregon's management questions. And the reason we focused on rocky reefs and kelp forests is that these ecosystems are important to support fisheries, biodiversity, a lot of cultural values, but they're also under stress. And I'm sure you've heard about the challenges to our kelp forests. This work informs, the research work informs decisions like whether allowing large-scale urchin removals might be beneficial, about whether the reintroduction of sea otters might be beneficial. But these come with potentially large ecological and economic consequences, so they can't be made cavalierly, and they need good data to evaluate their prospects. We have 6 projects underway that are in this space, and they're generating critical data and making it accessible for managers and communities. So this is science with purpose. It's strengthening resilience for ecosystems, economies, and people. The second area is ocean acidification and hypoxia. And hypoxia is just a technical word for low oxygen zones in the ocean. These are symptoms of climate change in the ocean or ocean change. And they're hitting the West Coast and Oregon particularly hard. Acidification here is more than twice the global rate, and low oxygen zones have increased dramatically since the 1950s. These low oxygen zones can now affect up to almost half of Oregon's continental shelf, the area off the coast in our territorial sea, before you go into the very deep areas. And that size can reach as large as the area of the Willamette Valley, or the state of Connecticut, for reference, seasonally. It's not a persistent state. But these changes, nonetheless, threaten marine life and fisheries and coastal economies. The trust is tackling this particular issue with 7 diverse projects, monitoring where and when these conditions occur, and studying the impacts on shellfish and potential solutions like sustaining healthy eelgrass meadows or kelp forests, and in the places where they might provide some refuge. Additionally, we are improving how we communicate about this science issue to the public. Our investments are helping Oregonians know what's happening, plan for adaptation, and understand why it matters, turning the science into action for resilience. The third area that we want to highlight where we've had a major accomplishment is with supporting Oregon's Marine Reserves Program, the conservation areas that have been established along the coast. And these were legislatively mandated to have an assessment on their performance and effectiveness. And the trust played a critical role in making that happen because it was an unfunded legislative mandate. We successfully raised the resources all during the pandemic to keep the work on track, partnering with Oregon Sea Grant, OSU, and the Oregon Community Foundation. The assessment's outcome were positive. They highlighted that or confirmed that the reserves are working as designed and they're effectively implemented, and that the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife effectively met its legislative mandate. It also highlighted, however, the need for continued monitoring, research, and adaptive management to sustain both the ecological and socioeconomic benefits. And this work did help inform active legislative action through HB 4132 in 2024 to help advance these recommendations for the future. So I'm going to shift now. Those are sort of 3 areas of investments where we've been had some nice accomplishments, but we are working on a new initiative, and this is a large part of our visit with you today, is to communicate about that and to get your feedback also. We have embarked on this initiative called the West Coast Ocean Science Action Agenda. And the Action Agenda is a collaborative effort among Oregon, California, and now Washington as well. And it's led by the only 2 ocean science trusts in the US, California and Oregon. We have a unique structure with government and nonprofit status. And Washington's Department of Ecology has recently partnered with us on this. The idea is to set out a 10-year framework that will set strategies, timelines, and needed funding to address the complex ocean and coastal challenges for the West Coast, a region that is linked ecologically, physically, if you will, by the California current, a big ocean current ecosystem. And we are talking with key policymakers, agencies, tribes, academic leaders, scientists, potential funders to inform development of this action agenda. It is going to move us beyond just identifying the needs, aligning research and monitoring priorities, investments in infrastructure, technology, and workforce development to create a diversified funding portfolio, state, federal, private sources, to be able to implement and deliver results. Our engagement strategy is already underway. This is one piece of it. And we partnered early with California Ocean Science Trust and are building partnerships with like-minded West Coast organizations. We will be building a strong case and presence to be effective in Washington, D.C. and regionally. There's a long history of significant funding investments, tens of millions going to other regions for significant initiatives. And while we are fully aware of the disruptions to federal funding at this time, we are looking to the future, preparing to show up for the West Coast ocean science needs at the right time with the right partners to secure high-value support for Oregon and the entire West Coast.
Thanks, Dr. Nielsen. Just in closing, we'll just kind of wrap with the idea. As a lifelong coastal resident, I find myself in communications more and more talking about how the ocean just isn't a bucket off to the side that's its own thing to be invested in and managed and dealt with, but really it's the driver of many solutions that can support a lot of Oregon's priorities. So here's just a couple of examples that I know are high priorities for the state. Transportation. We're in a position to do research on coastal hazards, erosion, sandy shores. When it comes to energy, we already talked about the importance of understanding impacts of some of these infrastructures that are being proposed. Climate, Dr. Nielsen talked about ocean acidification, and we're also talking about blue carbon and marine carbon removal as solutions for being a bigger buffer for the ocean. And when it comes to food and health, really ensuring sustainable seafood supply as well as advancing regenerative aquaculture. And economic development, we all know the blue economy is at the forefront of economic drivers, especially for a unique state like Oregon that enjoys that wild edge, if you will. So the OOST is also engaged there. So I just want to thank you for your time and see if there are if anything came up for any of you during our presentation, or if there's any clarification we can give.
Thank you for the presentation. It's good to have you both here. Any comments, Mr. Secretary?
I do have a question, but I'm happy to let the treasurer go first.
Well, we'll go to this side first, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you so much, Governor and Mr. Secretary. I have 2 questions, but I'm happy to. Ms. Anderson, you mentioned the role of OOST, because how can I resist saying that acronym? In thinking about offshore energy projects, the need for ongoing development of renewable, low environmental impact energy is critical in the ocean. Certainly with wave and wind has enormous potential. Does this entity actually get any formal say in that, or is there's no specific role for you all? It's just contributing to the science around the impact of those projects?
Yeah, I think what you're getting to is this fine line between policy and science. So the OOST wants to position itself as a source of knowledge and information, not just scientific knowledge, traditional knowledge as well. So policy recommendations would come from kind of our sister entity, which is the Ocean Policy Advisory Council. So maintaining somewhat of a firewall there helps us to protect our integrity as just keeping the research straight. There's so many opinions on ocean energy.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, all of us have served in the legislature, and we know how important good science is for making smart policy decisions. The other question relates, Dr. Nielsen, to the points you were making about the questions about removing urchins and reintroducing otters. I think I get, intellectually at least, why the question of removing urchins and bycatch and damage to kelp forests and stuff, when you're doing that, is a problem. I'm a little harder pressed to understand why there might be concerns about reintroducing a native species that was driven to local extinction, if you will.
Thank you for the question. As a scientist whose marine ecology background, I'm very well prepared to answer these questions.
I figured.
So thank you for asking them. The kelp forest is an example of a fairly straightforward food chain where predators, will impact the things that are consuming the kelp and release them from that. So that's just the general gist of it. However, in systems where a major predator, keystone predator, we call it, so such impactful effect on the whole ecosystem, sea otters, that has adapted around not having sea otters. So imagine the folks who depend on resources that maybe sea otters eat, let's say crab. Right. Which is also important to our economy. That's why we say it has both strong social, economic, and ecological consequences potentially. And that's why we need really good information to understand whether that's the right course for Oregon. As a conservationist, I would say we would love to have restoration to sort of a original state, if you will, but it's hard to determine what is that original state. Is that beneficial for all of us now? So there's a balance in those two perspectives. And as a scientist, I can kind of see both of them, and I can see the passion and the interest in both pathways. So I'll kind of leave it like that, a little bit neutral, but it depends on whether your priorities are, there are two sets of priorities that need to be balanced.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question in some ways was asked by the Treasurer, and in some ways was answered, but I want to see if we can expand a little bit. I'm thinking particularly about the intersection between policy and politics, and to what degree the research agenda is influenced by skepticism, or whether you're trying to push in new directions of research that you don't know the answer yet, or to sort of prove things that we suspect but that are maybe not believed or questioned. It's not very articulate, but I'm thinking about where there are opportunities that science points to and needs that need to be addressed, but a lack of enthusiasm or people being convinced as they are directly affected. So how can you talk a little bit more about how maybe the advisory committee and the research agenda interact and how they affect each other?
By advisory committee, if I could just clarify which one?
I may be using the wrong term. I thought I understood
The trust or
on the other
OPAC?
side of the firewall.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear that I understood that. Do you want to start or do you want to?
Please.
Okay. So thank you again for that question. Science is interesting. There are some things that seem obvious, and then when you go and kind of look under the hood a little bit more, you learn some more. And so while we know a lot about the effects of climate on the ocean, for example, ocean acidification, ocean warming, the influence on the low oxygen zones, we may not know the best ways to solve those problems or to help mitigate them. And so the science is in kind of the details and trying to make sure we don't have surprises. And there are some pretty complicated things about managing fisheries. I think our fishermen and our fishing fleet and people who work on the ocean see ocean change. How they ascribe that, what they ascribe it to is varied, depending on who you're speaking with. And so, just more information is not found to be that effective. We can throw a lot of data at people, but helping them understand it, helping them be part of the science and contribute to it, are more effective ways. So that's why there's an investment in communications around that issue, so that we can more effectively help people understand in ways that aren't just like data and charts, but are helping them tell stories, helping them relate what they're seeing to what we're understanding, and building trust. I think that's.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we talked about this quite in depth in our last science summit, the difference between science for science sake and science that serves. And I think the OOST has to really put its emphasis on science that serves in order to meet what it's intended to do, which is serve the state. So if we're working with $2 million over a 5-year period, that's not a lot of money in the science realm. We got to be really focused on that. If we're able to meet more of a target of having $10 million to distribute over a 3-year period, then we might be in a position to be a little bit more beyond into what you're describing, Secretary Reed.
I think I maybe didn't do a very good job describing.
Oh boy, we just spent a little bit of time.
No. I track, but I want to be sort of more blunt. So let's remove the financial pressures. I get that, but if you have a question that science has largely answered, and you have some skeptical people in the community who are saying we don't believe it, are you going to say science has settled this question and we're moving on to some other ones? Or are you going to say, here are some other ways that we can help communicate the validity of the science? I think that's really what I'm trying to understand.
So I might offer that there are, OOST is really strictly pretty tightly linked to the science. Behavioral science, communication science might be an aspect, social science might be an aspect that could help us with that and understanding it. But I would offer, as someone who also works with our with OSU and Extension Service and Sea Grant, that there's a lot of engagement that happens that involves community education, joint problem solving, where you get more traction maybe in that space. Because the intention of extension work is to bring good information to bear on supporting behavioral and understanding change, if you will.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson and Dr. Nielsen. Thank you for being here. I need a tutorial on marine carbon.
Oh, we can help with that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not the OOST, but my other role, I can certainly help with that.
Yeah. Or a presentation.
Yeah.
Or a briefing. That would be great.
I can help.
As we look at some orders coming out of my office to talk about our natural working lands, just kind of curious, what that means on the ocean side. I really do appreciate the idea of science for service. I think it was a huge opportunity to have the 2 million for the trust. It was good to see the details of some of the granting you've done. I'm just personally very concerned about our blue economy, making sure the science gives us some sense. We're never going to have 100% perfect, but like generally speaking, we should start doing X, Y, and Z. Do you expect we'll see some kind of recommendations, or does that go to the OPAC? Like, what's the comment? Like when someone says, "Okay, what can we do to help our coastal economies right now?"
Yeah, well, just in interest of full disclosure, also, I do serve ex officio on OPAC.
Great.
So I can be a conduit at a minimum of information across these spaces. And so, yeah, I think OPAC is probably the body that can help bring those things together and make recommendations for you as they are advisory to the governor.
Okay, well, we'll follow up with them, and I'm super excited about the West Coast Alliance on Science. I think that's great. How large is the California Ocean Science Trust?
Large, do you mean?
Like money, what, like
Money wise? Well, interestingly, they did in recent years, and putting on my other hat now, get an endowment from the California legislature during their flush years. That was not a short-term undertaking. That was something the board worked on for a long time. And that has provided, I will just say, quite a measure of stability because they are working off the, those investments and the proceeds from those. Grant making is volatile, and you can, indirect costs only cover so much of your kind of core operational needs. Being able to write other grants, you can't charge one grant to write a grant for another organization. So it does provide some stability. And I think that was on the order of a $10 million endowment, which was pretty substantial, but at the time it was possible. They also do get grants from the legislature to help with their specific role, which is different than ours, which is really the communication of science and policy and addressing state needs. So from the executive branch agencies, when they have particular science needs and questions, they work with those agencies and staff up at like this presentation on blue carbon you just asked for.
Got it.
They might bring the best scientists together and present a white paper and a presentation.
Interesting.
On specific issues.
Whereas we probably
They're
use our
way more-
university structure for that. Versus
Yeah, I mean, it's just, they've been around longer. It was envisioned slightly differently than ours, but very similar in terms of the relationship with the state, serving science needs for the state.
always great to work along the West Coast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Treasurer. Yeah.
Thank you so much for allowing me one more question. You alluded earlier to the work that you do with NOAA, and I really don't want this to be a political question. I want to understand more about whether the work that you're trying to do with the science has been limited or anything. Is your partnership with NOAA more strained or different, or are your local partners able to keep doing the same kinds of work?
Well, the interesting thing about a cooperative agreement is that we are employees of Oregon State University. So I'll say that. Our funding sources are diverse. We're not, my hat has the color of money that funds my position comes from various sources. So it's not all federal. And that's true for most of our staff. In terms of, yes, we have received special award conditions from NOAA around Sea Grant work. And they are aligned with trying to not go against the federal administration's priorities. So I'd be happy to share the language, but
Okay.
yeah, they're not severe, but there is some.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I would echo the governor's appreciation of the West Coast Ocean Alliance, because as far as I can tell, oceans don't particularly obey geopolitical boundaries.
Nope,
So
not at all.
I think it's great that you all lined up together. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good to have you here. Appreciate it.
You both.
Our next informational item number 5, South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve Annual Report.
Our
Good to have the
intention-
South Slough.
Coastal theme today.
Lots of coast going on.
So I'd like to introduce and welcome Deputy Director of Real Property, Chris Castelli, and the Director of the South Slough Reserve, Patricia.
Good morning,
Morning.
Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, Treasurer Steiner. For the record, my name is Chris Castelli. I'm the Deputy Director of the Land Management Division, and up here today is also.
Hello, for the record. Good morning. My name is Patricia Fox. I'm the Reserve Manager for the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. Thanks for having us present the 2024 annual report. Secretary Reed, Governor Kotek, and Madam Secretary, or Madam Treasurer, excuse me. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to tee this up and then let Patricia talk about all the good work they're doing down at South Slough. But I just wanted to take a second to recognize Patricia, who is celebrating her 11th year here at DSL tomorrow. I've been fortunate enough to work with Patricia all this time as we were both policy specialists, operations managers together. She's a wonderful person. She's a great manager, and we're very lucky to have her running the reserve for us. So with that, we are pleased. Where is the clicker? Right here. We are pleased to present the highlights from the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve's work from 2024. As a reminder, the South Slough manages nearly 7,000 acres of natural area, including open water channels, tidal and freshwater wetlands, riparian areas, and forested lands. You can see here a view of our beautiful skunk cabbage blooming at one of our boardwalks at our Hidden Creek Trail. We co-steward these lands with our 3 local sovereign tribal nations, the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, Coquille Indian Tribe, and Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. And I'm not sure which button. Oh, there we go. It's the middle. South Slough has 3 core programs: research, stewardship, and education. Within these core programs, we provide training opportunities to coastal decision makers to help make our coastal communities more resilient, conduct research working with researchers from universities around the globe, host interns from high school and beyond, provide stipends so teachers can come to the reserve to learn how to incorporate coastal estuary science into their classroom, and teach students inside and outside the classroom, after school, and on field trips. We host a variety of educational classes for community, no matter what age you are, from nature movies in our arboretum, complete with movie popcorn during those stormy coastal days, to crabbing and mushroom classes. And we had a mushroom class on Saturday I got to see, and it was pretty well attended, I thought. There was simply something for everyone, and let's not forget the nearly 7 miles of managed trails open to the public year-round from dawn to dusk. 2024 alone, over 3,000 people were served at our visitor center, and those are just the folks who came in during operating hours. Over 1,500 students in Oregon from K through 12 participated in field trips or in-school learning. You can see Sherry Turner, our seasonal educational specialist, with Jamie Bellinger, our educational coordinator, taking a water sample and placing it on a refractometer to measure how much salt is in the water for a lesson on salinity in estuarine waters. Additionally, 164 programs were hosted by South Slough for public education, from interpretive classes to science camp. 56 research projects were conducted. Over 200 decision makers were trained on coastal ecology topics important to their community. Finally, 67 volunteers helped us keep invasive species at bay during our volunteer Saturday Stewards events co-hosted with the Friends of South Slough group, which is a really important group for our reserve. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Patricia to talk about the report takeaways.
Thank you, Chris. We're receiving $3.1 million from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We broke ground in 2024 and did a lot of earth moving work to regrade the valley in order to remove invasive species, predominantly the invasive reed canary grass, return stream flow, and create valley elevations for native wetland habitat. Almost 10,000 fish and amphibians were relocated in the process. So the fish salvage was a huge lift for us. And we had a lot of help from our partners at ODFW and Coos Watershed Association, not to mention the 18 interns that we hosted just that summer alone. The five-spine crab is an invasive species that destroys eelgrass beds, negatively impacts native clams, Pacific oysters, and Dungeness crabs. You guys have been hearing about the five-spine crab. I like to not call it green crab because they're not always green. Five-spine crab for years. We have 22 years worth of data studying them to better understand their habitat, predation habits, abundance, and hotspot areas. As we do not believe eradication will be a successful outcome at this point, we are taking an applied science approach by making a business case for the supply demand for the meat for culinary purposes and the shell for a compostable byproduct for chicken feed. Through a grant, we are working with Southwest Oregon Community College to purchase a commercial crab meat extractor to help build a business case to create a demand for the crab meat, and are currently conducting trials for the shells for chicken feed. Our hope is to manage these crabs by creating a market demand that would enable a case for commercial take permit for ODF&W to consider, and for the education for the public to distinguish the five-spine crab from Dungeness, as they are not always green in color, but they always have five spines on either side of their eyes. I fully expect questions about this. The South Slough Reserve was the first estuarine research reserve in NOAA's network. As such, we celebrated our 50th anniversary with 3 occasions, not 1, 3. The first occurred at the Spruce Ranch, where we house our visiting researchers overlooking the Wasson Valley and listen to stories from our tribal partners of their memories from these lands, to the August Land Board meeting where some of you attended, as shown in this picture. Showcases the 700 square feet of newly renovated exhibit hall. Finally, we brought our celebration to the community, as that is where South Slough started, within the community. We co-hosted an event with the Friends of the South Slough at the Coos History Museum and shared stories, saw old friends, and just had a really good time. Resonating with the community is something South Slough strives to do with all of its programming. We host community events out and about in the area, whether it's in Bandon or through an after-school program in North Bend. Or we help others come to us. Last year, we provided stipends to help 33 teachers in Oregon travel to the reserve to learn about coastal estuary science. Simply, people make our programs. We do a lot with a little, and we simply cannot do it without our folks. Long-term data sets cannot have any gaps or blips or pauses. You just never get them back. They're lost forever. South Slough has several long-term data sets that are crucial for keeping now and for the generations to come. As we were the first estuary reserve in NOAA's network, we have 30 years of water quality data. We have 21 years of eelgrass data and 15 years of salt marsh vegetation data. If we have a pause in funding or we have a pause in people, then we cannot sustain those data sets, and there will be no one to pick them up. So this picture is a little fun. It's showcasing a local contractor that we worked with, Rogue Detection, that found animal scat in the Wasson Restoration area. We sent to OSU Genetics Lab for analysis, so we could understand what wildlife were present in the restoration area before we started the Wasson Restoration Project. The next phase of the Wasson Creek Restoration Project for phase 2 is going to be focused on increasing forest health and fire prevention through variable thinning in the uplands. Also focus is planting the native species to outcompete all of those invasives we just took out, and building stream complexity. We also have a new trail that will actually be the first trail in the last 25 years in South Slough. So it has not been named yet. That will be a whole thing. But it will be a loop trail, and it will lead down to a brand new boardwalk. It's going to showcase this the new Wasson Valley Ridgetop to Estuary Restoration Project at the 525 acres that you've been hearing so much about. And the new trail will be about a third of a mile. It will focus as much as we can to help with a mobile challenged audience, and it's going to help with our education programming as well. So you can see this look up the valley and then look all the way down and be part of this restoration and immerse yourself into it. So very excited about it. Probably next spring we're going to let the new trail overwinter, but it's just the foundation's been just completed at this moment, and the boardwalk's not quite done yet. The Visitor Center front entrance project was a $1.6 million procurement, acquisition, and construction grant project. And that project seeks to improve safety and security in our parking lot at the Visitor Center, expand school bus parking and provide overflow parking, much needed, and provide network cable for the internet to the Visitor Center. So that thing that you never see, but we so desperately need, which is reliable internet. This type of grant required a cash match, not in-kind services, but cash. That is usually a very hard order for us to be able to do. And that's where our Friends of South Slough grant, or our Friends of South Slough came through for us. They provided a 30% cash match for us that was required for this type of grant. The work is starting right now and will finish before the spring, and our school programming will still take place without a hitch. And our visitor center will remain open to the public the entire time, along with all of our trails. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Where's, I think, there's a delay.
Chris, Patricia, always really uplifting to get the report from the South Slough. So thank you. Really good to see you. Questions, comments? You just have one of the coolest jobs ever. So just gotta say that.
I do.
And let's all work together to make sure the South Slough does not see any hiccups in the work they're doing. Right? So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. With that, staying on our marine theme,
I know.
coastal theme for the day, informational item number 6 is our Southern Resident Orca Management Plan.
Thank you. This one might seem a little odd to have at the Department of State Lands, but it is a requirement from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife because of the fact that Southern resident orca whales are listed both under the Federal Endangered Species Act, but also under the State Endangered Species Act, which requires state agencies, state partners to take action over state lands. And DSL does manage the near shore environment. So I'd like to introduce Natalia I'm going to butcher this, Stranadanko. Thank you. To our territorial sea specialist to present on the Southern Resident Orca Management Plan.
Thank you, Director. Welcome. It's good to have you. There we go.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Good afternoon, Governor Kotek, Secretary Reed, and Treasurer Steiner. So for the record, my name is Natalia Stranatka. I'm Territorial Sea Specialist within the department. And today I am presenting here department recently adopted Southern Resident Orca Endangered Species Management Plan. And you can see on the screen the picture of orcas, most of you recognize. The stop predator in the ocean guardians with this nice and beautiful white and black swimming suit. So on February 16, 2024, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission, I will refer as a commission, listed Southern resident orca as endangered species under the Oregon Endangered Species Act. The Department of State Lands has a responsibility that contribute to conservation of the species, and today I'm providing the State Land Board with the overview of this responsibility, update on adoption of the Orca Management Plan, and you have this in your Appendix A, and outline our next step towards implementation, including where this work intersects with the Land Board oversight. Next slide, please. And I have only 2 slides. So the southern resident orcas, also known as killer whales, are a distinct population of orca native to the eastern North Pacific Ocean. They spend most of their spring through fall in the Salish Sea, and you can see a geographical location on the map on the screen, and their winters through early spring along the coast of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Oregon coast in the important migration corridor between their feeding areas to the north and south. The water near the Columbia River are especially important, providing a key foraging area for orca. This population of orca is critically low at this moment, and approximately, well, they estimate it's only 73 individuals in 3 pods, which means family. Major threats to orca include declining Chinook salmon, which is their primary food source, marine pollution, and disturbance from vessel traffic and underwater noise. So what is the role of the Department of State Land? Due to the department role in managing lands and waterways, the Commission directed the department to develop endangered species management plan within 18 months of the February 2024 decision. The department orca management plan was approved by interim director Bill Ryan on July 10th this year and adopted by the Commission on August 15 this year too. So the plan outlined how the department ownership and regulatory responsibility will contribute to conservation efforts orca. So first, the department manages Oregon waterways, including territorial sea, by issuing leases, easement, and other authorization for private and commercial uses. Easements within territorial sea require land board approval, and the conditions on the authorization may include conservation measures to reduce risk to southern resident orca. And such example include requiring evaluation of the project potential impacts on orca, requiring construction timing that avoid peak orca migration periods, and of course requiring decommissioning on any seafloor infrastructure and the end of its life cycle and recovery of the area. The department also protects wetlands and waters by requiring permits for most projects that add, remove, or move more than 50 cubic yards of materials in water. A permit required for any amount of materials in essential salmonid habit, including where Chinook salmon spawn and rear. Removal field permits often include conservation measures that limit disturbance to this salmon and their habitats, such as minimizing soil movement during the construction and improving habitat as compensatory mitigation measures. So what are the next steps? On June 10 this year, the Land Board initiated rulemaking process for Division 83 to update administrative rules for undersea cables easements. So the purpose of that is to strengthen protection for marine ecosystem while ensuring that the public receive compensation for seafloor usage. The proposed changes will also reflect conservation measures for southern resident orcas as defined in the recently adopted plan. The revised rules will also establish a more effective cooperation framework among applicants, states and federal agency, tribal governance, and local community. Many of these entities also share responsibility and interest in these conservation efforts. Rulemaking advisory committee will begin in December this year, and following input from the committee, public comments and consultation with agency, tribes and affected party, the department anticipates presenting the draft rules to the Land Board for adoption in 2026. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any question you may have.
Thank you very much for being here. Very interesting to learn more about our resident orca. Mr. Secretary, Madam Treasurer, any?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question so much as note of appreciation for the recognition in the memo here of the need for consultation, particularly with the tribal nations. So looking forward to seeing what's next.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Madam Treasurer.
Just curious about, obviously, protecting the orca requires building up the Chinook salmon population. And so how does the work that you're doing intersect with the work that I'm assuming it's ODF and W, but others do around Chinook habitat, and also the challenge of especially migration, the small out of the Columbia River across the bar with the tern population and the sea lions. Could you talk a little bit about how that all intersects?
So that intersects through the collaboration. And yes, as you mentioned, Chinook salmon is the main food for orca, and it approximately takes 70% of all food. So we are working on dated guidelines for particular salmonid requirements, and also MAP, which we take in information from ODFW when we maintain essential salmonid map on our website. So we, I just talked with ODFW last week. We will be working through the ODFW will establish working group next year, and we will meet approximately with all agency twice per year, see what update information there, and what we can put something new in our map on the website. So we will discuss how we can restore better and collaborate with different stakeholders during those working groups, and also federal agency, any management plan update. So we're working on that. Thank you.
Treasurer Steiner, I've invited Bill Ryan, Deputy Director of the Aquatic Resources Management Team, here to also speak to specifically how the essential salmonid habitat designation works with the removal fill program.
Thank you, everyone. Bill Ryan, Deputy Director of the Aquatic Resource Management Program. And yeah, Natalia actually started addressing the essential salmonid habitat designation, but just to be clear, so under the Oregon Removal Fill Law, which regulates the removal or fill or movement of material in waters and wetlands of the state, there's a 50 cubic yard threshold for most waterways. However, waterways that have been designated as essential salmonid habitat don't have that threshold. There's a zero threshold. So any amount of material movement within those waterways is regulated by the removal fill law. And so that designation is determined by data from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, who tells us where the spawning and rearing habitat is for the endangered and threatened salmonid species in the state. And so you have additional protections, and then on an annual basis, we update that map. There are additional essential salmonid habitat that's created by habitat restoration projects, and there are also losses that happen through development projects and that sort of thing as well. I did want to add also that we partner with the Department of Fish and Wildlife on issuance of removal fill permits. When a permit application comes to do removal or fill within an Oregon waterway, we put that out for public review, but also for review by our state agency partners, and we rely very much on the Department of Fish and Wildlife to provide us information about what sensitive salmonid and other species might be affected by the action that's being proposed to be permitted. And we do, require conservation measures that address and mitigate those effects. And that includes, obviously, impacts to Chinook salmon, which is the main food source for the southern resident orca population.
Thank you. I really appreciate the thorough response.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, both of you. Natalia, nice to meet you. With that, our last informational item is item 7, other, which is usually opportunity for the director to catch us up on other things. So, Director Lovell.
I will try to keep us on schedule, so I'll be brief. First, I've been on this job now 75 days. So I wanted to reflect on those that time, 60 of those days approximately have been spent on the road traveling the state. I want to express my appreciation and gratitude to all of you for directing me and giving me that time to get out into the field. And I really want to appreciate staff, the logistics going into that, as you all know, because you have the same crazy travel schedule. The heavy lifting is done by staff and making those connections, setting up those appointments, getting me on time. I get to show up and smile, and they do all the work. So thank you all for putting in so much time and effort and energy into making it so successful. I also want to thank the deputy directors who held down the fort while I was on the road. They really kept the wolves at bay. Not that there were wolves, very toothless wolves at bay during that time. But it was really important to know that the agency was in really good hands while I was out, and it allowed me to be fully present, to listen, and to learn when I was out meeting different folks. I met with our local government partners, with our nonprofits, with watershed councils. I actually spent an afternoon with our Catalyst Award winner, Kyle Wagner, out on the McKay Creek project. And most importantly, I have since visited with 6 of the 9 tribes. And on Friday, I will be meeting with the Siletz tribe. And then we're working on scheduling the remaining 2 tribes. That has been such an important part of my introduction, building relationships and building trust, understanding how DSL currently works and can work better with our tribal partners. You heard some of that reflection today in how we're moving forward on the Elliott State Forest Board appointments. Look forward to doing that more through a lot of different avenues. With my government affairs director and also tribal affairs director, Ellie Fornes, we are coming up with leaving each of those meetings with a work plan for each tribe for us to get to work and help to amplify and improve our partnerships with the tribes. A couple of takeaways from my travels. The first is that not a lot of people know, it's kind of ubiquitous, that there's just not a lot of familiarity with DSL. So it's great to see my role as an ambassador for the great work that's being done. Where people have interacted with DSL, it has been incredibly positive reception, and I really appreciate staff for the good customer service that they've provided across the state. They are out there in the community, and it shows. Finally, one of my management philosophies is to really make the whole greater than the parts, the sum of the parts. And important to that success is having good, strong parts. And being out with staff in the field and seeing the work that they do, this agency has incredibly strong bones, and it is a great platform to work from. So thank you for that opportunity to be here. And then working towards the whole, I want to explain what I mean by that with 2 examples. The first is the Stevens Creek Road Sale. You all received that press release a few weeks ago. That was a really exciting exchange that we had with the Bureau of Land Management through our in lieu fee exchange. We then sold that 260 acres to Hayden Homes. It's right outside of Bend. That will allow for the development of 2,400 houses, of which 20 acres will be deed restricted to affordable housing and specifically to prioritizing educator housing. That is an incredible contribution of Department of State Lands to the housing priorities, but it is not the only thing that Department of State Lands is doing to support the housing goals. Our regulatory side, our permitting side, is focusing on helping to look for alternative pathways to accelerating and streamlining the permitting to support housing development initiatives. And so when I talk about making the whole greater than the sum of the parts, I've worked to bring those pieces of the agency together to create an internal housing task force to make sure that we are re-examining every tool that we have in our toolbox with an eye towards meeting the housing priorities for the governor, while we're also still meeting the purposes and mission of the Department of State Lands to steward and protect our lands and waters in service of the Common School Fund. That's one example. The second is the Sandy River Delta. I wanted to provide you an update of that. As you know, that's an ongoing challenge that the agency has had to it was October or February 2023 that you all adopted restrictions to the Sandy River Delta. Our first efforts to enforce those restrictions did not go as planned. While I was out traveling, staff worked really hard and they really reevaluated how to approach working with the unhoused community currently at Sandy River Delta. They took a trauma-informed approach. They, thanks to the governor's office, worked with additional resources. It really enhanced our partnerships. And as a result of all of that, in September, we contracted with a really well-respected company called, I'm going to blank on their name now. Rapid Response. Thank you, Chris. And they got to work. They were out there every day. They really invested in providing resources to the unhoused population out there, providing services. And on October 1st, after really working to voluntarily ensure that people are able to move off the land properly, we were able to then go in and set a firm closure deadline and without incident moved all of the campers off of that property. And now we are working to clean up that property with rapid response and ensure ongoing protection of those lands while providing services and trauma-informed care to the former residents. So that is one example of how we are seeing the housing challenges and the unhoused population on DSL lands, but it's not the only one. So similar to the housing, I am working with our research properties on the South Slough and the Elliott State Forest with our real property lands out in the Eastern Oregon area and with our folks here in Salem to really understand how we can work together across all of our different parts to develop best practices and more streamlined and efficient approaches to really dealing with an array of unauthorized uses on DSL lands, and then working across agencies to see how other agencies, especially other land management agencies, are soliciting and executing best practices on their lands to deal with many of these unauthorized uses. So that's what I mean when I say I'm looking to really amplify the whole as greater than the sum of its parts. And I'm looking forward to the successes to bring back to you. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Thank you for the update. Any questions from the board? No. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it is a joy to be able to be on the road and see not just the state, but to meet with the team in various parts of the state. So to all of you, we know you are across our state doing great work and we appreciate you all. And with that, if there is nothing else, our next meeting is December. Okay, well, we'll see everybody in December. And with that, I will close the board